The Mexican government got a hold of the West Point Museum and insisted on return of all the captured battle flags that were captured in the Mexican War, the Mexican flags, which we had, mounted up and restored, and the government gave them all back. And the Mexicans took them, put them in a basement, a damp basement, and they all fell apart, and that was the end of it. But they did not give back the captured American flags they have.
Only in the storybooks, only in the storybook and in the movie Reds are big political movements like that unanimous.
A lot of people don't realize that there were 1 million Russian troops fighting against the Germans.
Well,
fighting against the Russians with the Germans, the White Russian Vlasov army and the POA. And all this stuff, and that a tenth of the German troops at Normandy were Russians.
I couldn't believe Fisher's book when I read about the anti-communist Russian army in World War II. The reason you say there were 1 million as though that's a big deal. Hitler wouldn't let it get larger than 1 million. Many millions of Russians wanted to fight against Joseph Stalin and the communists. People who agree with you and me that communism's bad and the democracy's good and Russia's evil and Norway's okay and England's great. There are people who agree more or less that they would choose the same sides we would. But their response to the American Civil Liberties Union would be to point a Buck Rogers ray gun at them, pull the trigger, and have an explosion, and have the ACLU just waft away in a purple smog, leaving nothing but a smoking crater. I don't want to do that. I want the ACLU to continue to do its, what I consider, absolutely irredeemably naive erosions into the gut work of America. I oppose almost everything they do, but it's voluntary. They do it. Where are you? Where am I? We are free to get together and fight them. We are free to get together and say we endorse Mayor Koch's call. We will contribute money, we'll contribute legal talent, just like the ACLU does. We will fight court cases, we'll lobby for new legislation. That's part of what I mean, that we're a schlemiel country. We let a handful of people from the ACLU make us feel guilty and make us feel like war criminals and even make us feel outnumbered.
Yes, exactly.
Let us overwhelm the ACLU and their activities with each other and our activities. That's the democratic way.
So the cartoon characters that you see just about everywhere you go, they're called Smurfs. Now, I have a young child, 3 years old, and there's a television program on with them every Saturday to be speaking tremendously about there's no need for money in the Smurf village, that nobody owns anything, that everything belongs to everybody, that Papa Smurf, who is the head of the Smurf village, is the one who knows everything about everybody. So don't do anything wrong because Papa Smurf will find out. That if you know,
I think the biggest change of my mind in the past 20 years ago, I would have attacked you mercilessly. I'd have said, for crying out loud, what do you think this is? Is it a children's cartoon? You got time to go looking at children's cartoons and seeing big conspiracies in them? I now am on your side. That's where it starts. I've never heard about this character. I want to know a lot more about him. Very great show. Bob will be back tomorrow. I'm having fun in his absence. Thank you, Bob. You can use my playpen anytime. Begin to let go. Same thing as an individual person. A little sugar won't hurt. A little extra butter won't hurt. A little extra dessert won't hurt. A little extra ice cream won't hurt. Oh, come on, a little less exercise won't hurt. Come on, one more drink won't hurt. Come on, what we can do without that extra hour sleep. Let's party. All these little things eventually add. I mean, I hate to sound like I'm telling a fable to first graders, but by golly, first grade fables are the best ones. They're the real ones. They're the essential ones. We just let so many little things go. It seemed beneath us. It seemed almost warlike and fascist to demand that children pledge allegiance to the flag. So when the children hear the beautiful faculty and read the editorials and hear television and every single thing in the culture, when it comes at them from every direction that the only ones who really respect America are the pot-bellied air raid wardens from World War II and their Archie Bunker daddies with their American Legion caps, and nobody else should really respect America. America's the pits. America's to be taken advantage of. I want mine all here now. Pay me off the books. Give me my unemployment benefits. Give me my welfare checks. Give me my food stamps. Give me my student loans. Whatever. Give. These things begin begin to add up. That's why we are in serious trouble. I am going to have to see a lot more pain before I will say that the president is doing anything inappropriate. Of course we're squealing. We have become criminally obese in our habits and our thinking and our lifestyles over the past 40 years, and we need a very good Paris Island drill instructor to bring us back into shape. I am just glad that we can do this while remaining a democracy. Democracies have a time in our own weight classes to frown upon the graffiti artist, to frown upon the kid who wants to get paid off the book so he can keep getting his unemployment, to frown upon those who desecrate the flag and giggle derisively during the Star-Spangled Banner. Fight in your own weight class. We're down to that now. Fight in your own weight class as hard as you can, and collectively we'll bring America back, just like the ones who did the opposite did so much to bring it down.
Harry,
yes.
A few more comments on last night's show.
Yes.
A woman was rather illiterate, who was resorting to the 1968 tactic of just saying racism and everything.
Exactly.
You would become a desiccated liver tablet as soon as someone said that to you.
Exactly.
And the attorney was a typical one on the left who would just try to obfuscate the issue, but with jargon and so on. Now, if you notice, all the people that have walked off your show are all liberal or to the left. Now, it's going to happen again because they don't like freedom of speech. They don't, and I applaud you for exposing their left ideas. Now, may I just tell you an incident about one of your former walkies,
Certainly.
Aptheker? Before I retired, he came to school once, and he was talking to his history club invited him. A big crowd was there, and he was talking about Dr. Daniel Williams, a black man who performed the first open-heart surgery in the United States, which he did. And he said, and that man, that great scientist, was denied the directorship of a hospital. And there was a gasp there. What was he? You're supposed to think, my God, this is racist. So I stood up. I'm familiar with the case. And I said, Dr. Aptheker, isn't it true that he lost the directorship of a hospital not once but twice, and each time to another black man? You know, I was sitting in the back row. You could see that the color drained from that man's face. He got very hostile because that's exactly what they do. Just pound away at this nonsense and racism, bigotry, poverty, murder, and so on. Am I correct?
Yes, you are correct, sir, and I have to tell you one thing. You have helped me crystallize my feeling about that show last night. You're right, the same old 1968 shell game. And like so many tired shell games, I had the feeling that I would have if somebody came up to me and said, would you like to buy the Brooklyn Bridge? Or the way a good-looking woman might feel if you said, haven't I met you someplace before? The only answer is, yich, is that the best you can do? Give me a break.
This is Barry Farber, and nobody ever accused Bob Grant of being a draft dodger before, but let the record show, look what day it is. And where is he? He left me with 2 wars, an insurrection in El Salvador, a revolution in Poland, and an intensifying recession. Bob Grant is not accused of being a draft dodger. I accused him long ago of being an intelligent, outspoken American who knows an incredible amount of history, and I am proud to have him on platform after platform on my general side of things, and there's no platform I'm more proud to share with Bob Grant than this one right here, WMCA, New York. Now, let me see if I understand what's going on. Who is it? Professor Irwin Corey, the comic who begins his routine by saying, is everything clear so far? Aggression. The United Nations has taken since 1945 and tried to define aggression. They have failed. Oh, don't throw pennies at them. They don't feel badly about having failed. They sort of enjoy their work. Anyhow, aggression, let me see if I understand it. If the Argentinians invade the Falkland Islands and the British attack them back, the British are defending themselves, right? If the Japanese bomb us on Sunday morning or any other time of any other day at Pearl Harbor and we strike back, we are defending ourselves, right? And so on around the world and back through history, except red lights flashing until more red lights flashing, Israel. Israel apparently can be shelled into face powder by the PLO artillery batteries operating in southern Lebanon. But then when Israel strikes back, is that self-defense? Why, no. Listen to the ministries and chanceries and embassies of the world. Listen to the Parliament of Man, the United Nations. Parliament of Man, did I touch a nerve? Is there anybody out there who remembers my 1945 dream that we would have a real Parliament of Man, the United Nations, before it became a VIP lounge for murderers and thieves and drug smugglers and dictators? The United Nations says Israel is an aggressor. Apparently any Jew who defends himself within 50 feet of an oven is an aggressor. I am taking the position that, horrible though it is, Israel had no choice but to clear a 20 to 25 mile buffer zones in northern Lebanon, protecting the northern settlements in Israel. Come out and fight if you disagree. If that's not enough to get a little show started with, may I point out that I jubilate at British victory in the Falkland Islands. Everybody is gathering around saying, give the Argentinians a last chance. Oh, no, I don't want bloodshed. I said victory. Best kind of victory in the world. You know that moment in football when you score standing up, nobody lays a hand on you? That's the best kind of touchdown. Who likes these bloody, bone-bruising barrelings over from the 1/2 inch line and a big old pile of flesh? No. Score standing up. I want the British to score standing up. If I were in charge of British military operations, I don't care what it would cost. I would simply stay there, leave the Argentinians cut out, cut off, isolated, and let the world come. Let them send delegations of journalists and parliamentarians. Let the beautiful members of the faculty go down and just witness the restraint of the British until the Argentinians come out with their hands up. While this business of trying to make a deal so the Argentinians can appear to have made a negotiated settlement and avoid humiliation. Why, humiliation is the nicest thing that aggressors deserve. And I wonder how many of you felt a kind of a nice feeling that you couldn't identify when it became apparent that the British had landed on East Falkland to stay. Not just a few little commando raids and rubber rafts and probings, but the British were back there to stay. Did any of you have that good feeling? Did you identify that good feeling as totally as I identified my good feeling? Here's mine. We have been treated far too seldom. A kid who doesn't get his nutrition has the right to scream. I haven't had my nutrition, Mommy, since 1945. I've just had 2 doses of what I need. The Israelis gave me a dose in 1973, and the British gave me a dose in 1982. I want more. What is that medicine? What is that nourishment? What is that protein? Well, stop and think. How many of you have your hands raised right now? How many of you realize that what we had in, let's make it a super riddle, as the New York Times got the guts to print this in their Saturday quiz, what was the world treated to in 1945, and then only again in 1973, and only once more in 1982? What it is a dictatorship attacking a democracy and getting its nose bloodied by that democracy. We don't get enough of that. That is the protein of morality itself. Hitler attacks. And then a German general named Jodl signs the unconditional surrender a few years later in a schoolhouse in France. The Arabs attacked Yom Kippur and were given mouth-to-mouth resuscitation about a month later by the United Nations, frantic that Israel would sweep everything. The Argentinians attack democracy, Great Britain. And now, look at them. The world needs more of that. Well, I think the world needs about an hour and a half for me to keep on moralizing about my beautiful secular religion, which is democracy. I just love it. It's my turn to be dogmatic. I have faced other dogmatic people like some of you all my broadcasting life, and you just curl up inside your fanaticism, your unbending positions, be they religious, be they political, be they social, be they sexual. Ha, ha, ha. It's my turn to be dogmatic now. I am a dogmatic defender of democracy. I don't want to hear about the merits of the case. I don't want to hear who took the Falkland Islands from whom. I will always cheer with the one, along with the ones with a parliament. I will cheer for the ones with a parliament, not the ones with a junta. I will cheer for the ones with a democratically elected Congress, not the ones with a central committee or a sole dictator. Now, this is two-way radio. Why do I have to let you talk back? That much of a democracy lover I'm not. But let's play the game according to WMCA rules. If you'd like to have... I will not challenge the Russian contribution, but ain't it a shame that after they helped defeat the worst dictator in history, they became the new worst dictator in the world?
Well, that's human nature. I mean, that's, you know...
We didn't. We liberated. They enslaved.
Differently about Russia. So I'm very suspicious of all these great people that will be at that rally that might be true Americans and having the wool pull over their eyes again. Watch out for Ramsey Clark and Gene Fonda and all these American haters.
Don't you love them? No, ma'am, I'll tell you something. They scared me a lot more in the 60s. See if you and I share a feeling on the following. Maybe you're too young to remember the 60s. You've got a good, young, healthy voice.
No, I'm not.
All right. But in the 60s, I thought, holy mackerel, they're rallying. Ooh, next thing you know, I think it's going to spread to Philadelphia. It's going to be a conflagration in Salt Lake. Even Gaffney, South Carolina is going to rise up. They're going to take broken bourbon bottles to the ramparts. It's going to be the end of our system as we know it. And look what happened there. All these rallies, what do they mean? They start out weak and they gradually taper off. Wait to find out why Israel kept its mouth shut about success, about victory. And General Chaim Herzog, who was later the voice of Israel in the United Nations, explained why Israel concealed success in the Six-Day War. Are you ready for this?
Yes.
He said, we knew that if so long as the world believed Israel was losing, the United Nations would take no action. Only when Israel was revealed as the winner would the United Nations go in and act. As long as they thought Israel was being wiped out, they wouldn't lift a finger. They would remain glassy-faced and silent.
Right, that's why you should kick the UN out of here.
Right, well, all right, I've got a better plan, but I will announce that at a later date. Yeah, it amounts to the same thing, but thank you very much. I've always suspected that those who make careers of fighting for peace don't care as much about, their followers do, the clergymen do, a lot of the members of the faculty do, the students do, the earnest young men and women do. But I have noticed something funny watching these movements, and I've watched very closely since there was a movement. I've been watching. I'm older than I look. I work out. I drink Nora Hayden's vitamin milkshake. No, I do. I jog. I eat leafy green vegetables. So I lurk there innocently at dinner parties. People figure I'm not going to remember the end of World War II. Lady, I remember the von Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact and the breach thereof by Adolf Hitler. So just don't monkey with me unless you are really prepared to deal. I've been watching these movements, and I don't think it's really killing they're against, the leaders, the cynics. I think they're against killing that makes America look bad. Oh, they were so vocal during the Vietnam War. End the war, bring the troops back home, let the Vietnamese North and South compose their differences, join hands, and do folk dances together. They never once mentioned a historical convulsion in the middle of the Vietnam War, in the mid-60s. Indonesia erupted into an anti-communist bloodbath. There may have been 500,000 communists killed in the Indonesian archipelago over one weekend. I mean, I know these figures boggle the mind. It happens that way sometimes. About that many Tutsis killed that many Hotsis, and I'm not making fun of African nations. Those are the names in Rwanda, Burundi, of two tribes that pulled the same slaughter on each other. The Hodis and the Tutsis, I think the names are. Anyhow, here we have 500,000 Indonesian communists slaughtered overnight. Did the American peace movement pay any attention? No, that was irrelevant. They didn't want to waste valuable television time just complaining about murder, trying to save lives. Those lives were irrelevant to America. They were irrelevant to the communist gains in Vietnam. Why bother mentioning 500,000 Indonesian communists? They were nothing but people. Well, I like to be consistent. I went on the air and denounced the Indonesian massacre of communists as vociferously as I could arrange to. And I did not get any company from our beautiful heroes of the far left who then and now pretend that they are so idealistic and moral and oh so reverent of life that they glow in the dark. Well, I couldn't find them, even with sharp glasses. Now, we have an opportunity now to save lives. Forget about the Pentagon and the military budget for a minute. There are about 10,000 lives in the South Atlantic that can still be saved. Argentina has lost this war. I cannot wait to meet Drew Middleton and say, Drew, for the first few days, I thought you were just, playing it with a poker face. Drew Middleton is the military affairs analyst for the New York Times. Every day he has a brilliant column analyzing every little filigree movement of the Falkland Islands War. And for the first few days, I thought he was just simply playing it straight. And then I thought he was biting his tongue. I can't wait to grab him by the lapel next time he's on my show, which incidentally, if anybody cares, is on WMCA a few minutes after midnight, 6 nights a week right here on WMCA. I can't wait to grab him when he walks into my WMCA studio next time and say, Drew, how could you keep a straight face? Here you're writing about the Argentinian commander's mistakes, and they are so cosmic. They are so breathtaking. Argentina has completely blown it militarily. Now, those troops are at the mercy of a civilized nation, Great Britain. It will be, to me, satisfying enough. I want the total defeat of the Argentinian military adventure. I don't want to reward aggression here in the Middle East anywhere. But isn't there some pressure we can exert on Argentina to give up, to let the troops go while they are still alive, to let their wives and families rejoice when they reach Buenos Aires? Wouldn't that really save lives? Is anybody out there trying to save that kind of life, those lives? There is no chance in the Middle East. The passions are just too fierce. We cannot go in there singing Kumbaya and expect Israelis and PLO to lay down their arms and join hands. But there's an earnest peacemaker and an earnest lifesaver. Then may I direct your attention not to America's nuclear arsenal at the moment. You're not going to change that tomorrow. Not to the Middle East. You're not going to change that tomorrow. But you may very well save some lives in the Falklands if you can find the right buttons to push, the right nerves to pierce, the right egos to stroke. South of the border and south of that border and south of the equator and south of a lot of borders, way down there on the cusp of Antarctica. I forget which one it was. It caught me completely by surprise. Last time I congratulated the network was when they made the coaxial cable work and gave us coast-to-coast television for the first time. No, there was a network that said there was a poll taken that said that the overwhelming majority of the American people favors the nuclear freeze. Now, I remember a day, don't you call me paranoid, I remember a day when most networks would have let it go at that, clear your throat, get on to something else, show some sexy model, putting that cream on her face, let the words sink in that the majority of the American people favors a nuclear freeze. Score one for us. No, this network did the honest thing for a change. This network said the support for a nuclear freeze is broad. It is, however, shallow. And then you saw the figures dance downward on the screen when they asked the important questions. What if America had to start first? What if there were no way to verify and make sure the Russians were living up to their agreement? And so on, down, until you had an almost empty house of those favoring the nuclear freeze the way the nuclear freeze would have to come about. Now, world cruise without major world war so much longer after World War II than after World War I. That was 1965. That gong went off 1982 already. Isn't it, Mike? 82? Yeah, okay. 82. Why so much time? Is there less evil in the world? Is there less bloodlust in the world? Is there less aggression in the world? Are there fewer ambitious maybe they don't have the guns anymore as good as they had in World War II? No. The reason that so much more time has elapsed, so much peacetime has elapsed since World War II, so much more than after World War I, is because America has the nuclear strength that so many well-meaning Americans are seeking to dismantle. For Bob Grant, welcome to WMCA.
Yes, Barry.
Yes, sir.
The propaganda mills of the Soviet entity have been working overtime recently as they seek to depict President Reagan and the United States as some thermonuclear missile rattling warmongering nation, and the Soviet entity is a surrounded and embattled peace-loving nation that only wants us to lay down our nuclear arms so they can embrace us in a worldwide peace. And they've got every left-wing wimp, whacker, and just plain screwball getting out there to show their support for the killers of Kabul this Saturday.
No, wait, stop. How'd you get on my right? I didn't know there was any room there. There are indeed some whackers. There are some screwballs, and in those ranks I've even met one or two wimps. But, sir, I am not going to deal with you as an ally, which I think you basically are, unless you do what I did and acknowledge that the overwhelming majority of people who favor the nuclear freeze are patriotic Americans who don't understand the issues as well as you do.
Well, explain my point of view, Barry. If we look at this rationally, logically, and objectively without prejudice, you have to realize that as they try to depict our beloved president as a warmonger, with the government that is pluralistic, but rather a monolithic communist dictatorship. And who was the warmonger when it was Brezhnev who sent tanks into Czechoslovakia? It was Brezhnev who has caused the disappearance of Lech Walesa. I mean, I wonder how come they're not out there protesting at the Polish embassy to find out where that patriot is being held.
By the way, I got...
who's using poison gas in Afghanistan. It's Brezhnev with the Vietnamese imperialist lackeys and running dogs of the Soviet entity who have taken over Campuchia and Laos, who committed genocide in Vietnam, who are waging wars of aggression in Angola, Somalia, and Ethiopia.
Sir, I've got to go. You know, Barry Gray always suggested that I hire you as my voice coach. You and he have had some tips on the air. If I were keeping a diary of the people who I speak to while I fill in for Bob Grant, I think I'd have to make a notation by your name saying that you are somewhat skeptical of communism's virtue.
Kenny.
Yes, Kenny.
Okay, you know who that was? That was Frank.
That was Frank.
Frank.
Okay, good.
Okay, now Frank is for Argentina.
No.
Oh yeah, he came out. He said that, because one of the reasons, he likes fascism. He liked Franco, he liked Mussolini, number one. He told that to Bob Grant. He likes them because there's a lot of 60% of Italians, and he says now, because they were Latin brothers, he's against England.
Now wait, stop.
Ago, our state legislators saw fit to place a question on the ballot asking the voters of New Jersey whether or not they wanted to urge the president to come to a nuclear arms freeze, and should we take the money that we save and put it for public programs and so forth. And I listened to these legislators wave the American flag and put all the faith and confidence in the voters of this state. And all of a sudden, Barry, when we started talking about placing another question on the ballot about a federal balanced budget amendment, it's a curious phenomenon. All of a sudden, we lost this great wisdom. The voters no longer had this wisdom. I wonder if any of your listeners might want to comment on what happened in New Jersey. Why did we lose this wisdom in the eyes of our state legislators?
These shows, this nothing personal with this Frank and with this Kenny. There's nothing else, Frank. He's an extremely knowledgeable individual. And this Kenny is an absolute unequivocal dimwit. Matter of fact, when he calls Barry Gray, or he calls up Bob Grant, I shut the radio for 5 minutes. The man is an absolute moron. Okay.
Oh, it's I?
Yes, it's you. Oh, now, you know,
I never argue with anybody who says, is it I? Because 99%, nay, 999 out of 1,000 will say, is it me?
The nominative case.
Absolutely.
Subject and the verb must match.
I don't care about your ideology, your opinions, or your bigotries. I just care about your grammar.
I'm with you, Barry. I'm with you 100%. Now, this is what I'd like to ask is sort of solving a mystery. Now, most of they had I think a similar march. I believe it was anti-nuclear. But I know Congressman Lizzie Holtzman was there at the time, and I had occasion to call her on this station and ask her, since I had seen pictures of the communist banners in the line of march, I asked her, would she be in the march? Were it a Nazi, or were there Nazis in there? She said no.
Ray, I don't get a chance to listen to him often enough. And I really wish I could, because I happened to be driving and I caught Barry Gray interviewing a woman from an organization known as Grassroots. And she was making the same simpering appeal. We've got to reach the people of the Soviet Union. And Barry Gray told her the facts of life in front of the world, but in such a nice way. Barry Gray doesn't wield the bloody saber. He does needlepoint, you know? Yeah. Anyhow, this woman, when Barry Gray finished with her, when Barry Gray finished asking her how in the world she's going to reach the Soviet people through the controlled, dictatorial, communist Iron Curtain media, this poor woman was in the orthopedic ward of Roosevelt Hospital getting her toes uncurled.
Communist, that he didn't sort of elaborate on the fact that this is a communist-inspired march. Lots of people, unfortunately, are not aware of that, but I feel that by bringing this to their attention, it may preclude some people from going.
Look, they didn't fool us in the 30s. They didn't fool us in the 50s. They're not going to fool us in the 80s. You asked me a question. I'd like to answer it. You said, Barry, why is the double standard?
Yes.
Why will people go like metal shavings to a magnet when it's a communist peace appeal or nuclear freeze appeal or whatever it is, but would never go and give aid and comfort to a Nazi regime with an appeal for a nuclear freeze? The answer is, there was once a big fat Irishman who drank a lot and kept falling downstairs. And a friend of his said he's a Brendan Behan who doesn't write. You understand? Now, all the Soviet Union is a Nazi Germany that has better table manners, better public relations, and won the war. If Hitler had won the war and finished off the Jews of Europe, then the next generation would have been would have yawned at that like people now yawn at Stalin's liquidation of the kulaks in the early days of Soviet Russia.
Barry, wouldn't you think that the various media would reveal the fact that this is Soviet-backed? I haven't heard that.
Well, ma'am, look, is it communist originated, communist inspired, communist backed, or merely communist enjoyed?
Well, the Mobilization for Survival is an anti-nuclear coalition. It includes the Communist Party, the U.S. Peace Council, the Soviet-controlled World Peace Council, and about, I guess, it looks like 80 organizations here.
He was on a television show in Canada, a talk show, about to promote a new book of poetry. He's written about 8 very successful books of poetry, a very well-known modern poet, Lawrence Vanderpost. And it happened to be August, and Lawrence Vanderpost saw that the guests on the show before him were some Japanese and some clergymen, and it was the now familiar Hiroshima lament. Wasn't it awful what America under Harry Truman in August of 1945 did to Hiroshima? It became Lawrence Vanderpost's turn to go on the show. The moderator said, as they always do, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we're proud to have the distinguished author of, and then he waved his book on the air. And Lawrence Vanderpost turned to the moderator and said, do you mind if we forget my book of poetry right now and just let me discuss your previous guests? And the mildly shocked moderator said, okay. Lawrence Vanderpost said, I was on the island of Java during World War II. I became a prisoner of the Japanese. I was the chief prisoner. I was liaison because I speak fluent Japanese. The Japanese frequently called me in when they wanted to transmit orders. Lawrence Vanderpost pointed out something I'd never thought of before. I mean, don't you think, just to get before and after,
and I'll bet you fit my before. Didn't you always think of the atomic bomb as simply what the French diplomats call force majeure, and what the rest of us call an overwhelming wallop? I mean, you just can't come back from that atomic bomb. And that the Japanese saw the atomic bomb and said, uh-oh, we can't match that, let's give up. No, not at all. The Japanese, before the atomic bomb, were fully prepared to fight and die to the last Japanese against America. Fully prepared. I mean, read your kamikaze, but death did not faze them. It was part of sacrifice for the emperor. So it wasn't just, uh-oh, they got a big firecracker, let's give up. Not at all. Lawrence van der Post points out that if we had not dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, many more lives would have been lost. And I'm not going to take the direction you think I am. I'm not going to say what that guy always says at the dinner party or at the bar or in the American Legion Hall. Let's say what he says first, just to make the point. He always says, yeah, well, you know, we saved a lot of lives. We'd have had to kill, you know, we'd had to kill a lot more Japanese. A lot of Americans would have been killed. We had to invade the home island of Japan. Those guys were tough. Their army was still intact, and they were ready to fight, and they would have fought. And we'd lost a lot more than we lost at Hiroshima and Nagasaki put together. No, that's not Lawrence van der Post's argument. Lawrence van der Post is not even counting a subsequent American invasion of Japan when he says lives were saved at Hiroshima. He's using a forgotten fact. The Japanese Empire was still intact. When Adolf Hitler was destroyed, the German Empire had shrunk to about 4 square blocks in downtown Berlin. The Russians rumbling in from this way and the Allies from the other way. Every country under Hitler had been liberated. The Japanese had their entire empire intact. Sure, we'd taken back some of the Philippines, some of the Solomons, Truk, Eniwetok, Tarawa, Iwo Jima, but they had the entire Indonesian archipelago. They had all of Southeast Asia, all of what we now call Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, all of the Malaysian Peninsula, gigantic hunk of China. They still had all of Burma. They had all of Thailand untouched. And millions of prisoners in those countries, all over that territory. Prisoners, you know, concentration camps, millions of prisoners. And the Japanese were winning the war before the dropping of the atomic bomb, and their mood did not improve as they began to lose World War II to the Americans in the Pacific. Their brutality. Lawrence van der Post spoke of, I believe in even-handedness. I do not despise Germans. I do not despise Japanese. I revere history, and I'm going to stick up for what I know to be the truth as long as I have breath. I don't want any trouble with Japan. I love democracy all over the world, including in West Germany right now. So this is not any vendetta on my part against old enemies. But I think it is unfair to keep remembering German cruelty and give the Japanese a retroactive amnesty and pardon. Lawrence van der Post says that the Japanese were so cruel. I'll just give you one little example to make the point. He says that once, for absolutely no reason, he didn't sneeze, he didn't hiccup, he didn't look the wrong way, but once a Japanese guard just jumped on him and beat him so senseless, and as he was sinking into unconsciousness, he had the following thought. He said, if this Japanese were 1/4 as cruel, I'd be 4 times angrier. But because he's as cruel as he is, I do not judge him by a human yardstick. He is other than human. And, I mean, you can lament the fact that a shark has you in his teeth, but you don't really hate the shark, do you? I mean, he's a different kind of creature. And so that's the way the Japanese were treating people. Of course, there was no food, hardly any food for the Japanese, so they certainly didn't share fair with their prisoner. They were starving. And Lawrence van der Post says that if the war had been delayed a matter of weeks, many more people would have died of starvation and deprivation and cruelty and exposure and whatnot in the Japanese disease, in the Japanese prison camps, than were lost at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now here's the central point. It was not that the Japanese felt overwhelmed by American weaponry that let them surrender or that made them surrender when the atomic bomb went off. Here's how Lawrence van der Post described it. He was called. He didn't know about the atomic bomb at all. He was summoned to the top of the hill. He thought he was there to be beheaded. I mean, he just really thought that because the Japanese had they were wild. He was summoned to the big house on the hill. It used to be the old Dutch governor's house when the Dutch ruled Indonesia. And to his amazement, talk about an out-of-body experience. Here's a tired, bedraggled, starving prisoner, Lawrence van der Post, in August 1945, ushered into the gigantic ballroom of the former Dutch colonial governor's mansion on the hill. the entire Japanese officer corps in that section of Java rose, bowed their swords, like clicking of heels. That was the German thing. The clanging of swords, one against the other, was the Japanese thing. They bowed. They raised little glasses of sake wine and said to Lawrence Vanderpost, "Congratulations on your victory." Now, see, here was the thing. That little flash, the fact that it was an overwhelming weapon, did not defeat the Japanese because they were afraid to fight atomic weapons. It enabled the Japanese ego to surrender. Plain 100 million more tanks, 100 million bigger conventional bombs, 100 million more troops with sharper bayonets and better bullets would not have made the Japanese surrender. They would have fought to the last. The nature, the completely at that time supernatural nature of the atomic bomb was interpreted by the Japanese as the flash from heaven that said to Japan, "Everything is changed. You may now surrender with your honor intact. Not yesterday, but you may now, with your total honor, surrender, because this weapon in the American hands is the flash from heaven." Interesting story, to me, mind-boggling, and even more boggling than that, mind-changing.
Hey, I'm going to tell you something.
Oh, come on. No, I'm sorry.
Hold on, Barry.
No, I'm not. I'm sorry. I am not going to hold on. Look, I'm not in this. This is the Bob Grant program. We do not, this is not a forum where anonymous callers who feel they have been slandered are allowed, much less invited, to call back and defend themselves. So even though I rather enjoy you, I am symbolically cutting you off. That is not the purview or the purpose of this broadcast. New Jersey.
Anyway, I think it's more important in today's world than the famous Guilford Courthouse. Do you know that a peace group was invited to Russia? I have the article here from the Times last week by the Soviet Peace Committee, who's been trying to discredit the United States. They were allowed to go into Leningrad with even with their T-shirts saying USSR, stop testing now, led by Daniel Ellsberg. Now, if you've been in Leningrad, and so have I, Nevsky Boulevard is about 16 lanes wide.
It's not bullets, Nevsky Prospect.
One or two cars an hour. Now, they started handing out leaflets, and they were surrounded by officials, escorted back to and putting up placards, escorted back to the boat, towed out to the Gulf of Finland, and told to go home. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
And I have the article here. I'll be very happy to mail it.
Oh, no. I'll take you. Matter of fact, I was wondering where Daniel Ellsberg is now. Does it say where he is?
Opinion of why I'm going to be at the rally on June 12th. And that is because I want to show that it's not a matter of countries, it's not a matter of ideologies, it's a matter of the planet, and it's a matter of life. Warfare is no longer the traditional, conventional type of warfare that we knew about. It's a completely new ballgame. And I don't want to participate.
I understand. I think what you mean, I don't like to look, if anybody wants to fight in any kind of war, I'll hold his glasses. I think what you mean to say is that warfare has the potential to become different. There have been many wars, many aggressions. Dictators have seized much territory since World War II, all with the same old conventional arms. The Middle East right now is aflame with conventional warfare. The South Atlantic is aflame with conventional warfare. El Salvador is aflame with conventional warfare. So see, right away, I'm just bothered. I used to get angry at my parents when they would believe every bit of propaganda anybody sent them that was more or less in accord with their heart. Your heart is exactly where you say it is. But look how sloppy your thinking has become. Warfare is no longer the same old. It's fortunately.
Warfare is not right, no matter what type of warfare.
Of course it's not, but it is the same old warfare. We have not had a nuclear bomb since 1945.
And we do not want one.
Absolutely, absolutely. But you are wrong when you say your thinking is diseased, ma'am, when you say that warfare is not the same. People want you to believe that warfare is not the same. They want nuclear freezes, quote unquote, until they are ready to unfreeze. And in the meantime, while we are frozen, they want to go on exercising their superiority in conventional war. Don't you see what they're putting over on you?
Hey.
They are...
What I am doing, and I know what I am saying, I do not want war at all, conventional or non-conventional.
Ma'am, forgive me. I just have all kinds of strictures and structures against arguing with somebody who answers questions by saying, I don't like war. I don't like war either. But
I love freedom, I love democracy, and if anyone threatens them, I will do my best with the best weapons available to wage war to defend those achievements.
You had a person on the air who insisted that an all-out nuclear war would bring an end to the human race, when just the other night you had the fortune of having Dr. Edwin Teller.
Dr. Edward Teller, right.
And so-called father of the nuclear bomb, when he pointed out that most definitely, even if there was an all-out nuclear war, the human race would go on.
You are right. Is your question why I did not challenge that observation?
No, I'm saying, why didn't you bring up that evidence that
exactly.
provided with you?
Exactly. Okay, so your question is, why did I let that go down without challenging?
Dr. Teller said we would not survive the Soviet Union because it is prepared with massive civil defense, would survive for the most part, and all the Southern Hemisphere would survive.
As frank and forthright with you as you are with me about your feelings. I thought of what Dr. Edward Teller said when the person said nuclear war will be the end of mankind. But if you listen to Dr. Teller as carefully as I did, I don't blame you for not, because I have the tape and I've heard, it's my show, so naturally I listen to it very, very carefully.
I have the tape too.
All right, fine. Dr. Teller himself knows how unwise it is to be drawn into that argument. I don't know if you're a football fan, but you know what I mean by a trap? A play where the enemy makes it easy for you to charge through the line, and you think you're a great defensive lineman, and all of a sudden, whop, somebody hits you from the side, and there you are sitting on your fanny, watching the guy who you were supposed to tackle, and his jersey's getting smaller and smaller. Now, I want to win this argument. I want more people to be convinced that you should be skeptical of a nuclear freeze, you should be in favor of a strong nuclear readiness, and you do not win that argument by taking well-meaning people, and that person was a very well-meaning woman. Her voice was freighted with sincerity. I am not going to be trapped by saying, oh, come on, ma'am. Dr. Edward Teller himself said nuclear war is survivable. Now, do you see where that puts us?
Oh, yes, but there are some other facts.
Maybe he said it to me off the air, but I know that he is very sensitive to the public relations. See, because he has been victimized by people, more victimized by... Let me tell you a story that he told me off the air. This poor man is still recoiling. Dr. Edward Teller, I said, Dr. Teller, do you know that the stupidest, most naive question I ever asked? It was my honor to drive Dr. Teller back to his hotel after the show. And I said, Dr. Teller, are they really laying for you out there in the media? Are they really as unfair as people like me complain they are? And, he's beyond anger. He's a very calm philosopher now. And Dr. Edward Teller, the so-called father of the hydrogen bomb, told of laborious interviews, hours and hours and hours of videotape with an outfit in Boston for a documentary. And he turned on the television set to watch this show. And it was a nightmare. They had lifted everything out of context. They had perverted, they had distorted, they had transmogrified this man's whole view, and a chimpanzee could not get it that wrong accidentally. It was deliberate. And the moderator, who was so genial during the taping, says, Dr. Edward Teller is happy now that he has reduced the cost of taking a life to 8 cents per person. That kind of thing. So Dr. Teller is the first to understand that you do not come on the air and argue with frightened people, particularly when they are sincere, and say, oh, come on, lady, don't be a nervous Nelly. Sure, we can survive nuclear war. We do not want nuclear war, but we do want nuclear readiness. At least I do.
Make one other point. It's about the Middle East.
Yes.
The last speaker pointed out how disgusting it is that Israel is hitting all these innocent people. Well, the thing is, what I would just point out, the reason the PLO is hiding underneath the skirts of a civilian population. And I mean, who said that's right? That's to hide underneath the skirts of the civilian population.
Sir, as I have said so many times, it is my turn. The Falklands give me a chance to relax and be as absolutely closed-minded, dogmatic as so many of the people I've been bloodying my nose against in arguments over the years. We have met dogmatic people of all religions. We have met dogmatic communists. I am a dogmatic
democracy lover. I will always favor the one with a parliament over the one with a junta. I believe that had Britain not done what it did, it would have rewarded aggression. You reward aggression in one place and it will break out all over. You see, I believe that. I think it's the biggest political argument in the world today. Do you believe that if you reward aggression, if you fail to respond to aggression...
No, I understand it.
Well, do you say that we have the right to the territory of Cuba because it's only 90 miles off our shores? If Cuba's only 90 miles, we should have 5 times as much right to Cuba as the Argentinians have to the Falkland Islands.
Spain conquered all of South America.
Which proves what?
Which proves that they lay claim to it, just as we lay,
No, wait.
from the east lay claim to lands out west.
No, wait a minute, sir.
Act.
Oh, sir, you are a teeming supermarket of various products and flavors. Let me study you for a minute. You say that Argentina should have territorial rights over the Falklands because Spain conquered all of South America.
No, not basically South America. I stated a fact. Spain gave Argentina its independence and had owned those islands for 200 years. It also gave those islands to Argentina.
All right, does Mexico have the right to Texas and California and Arizona?
Well, there's a point to be raised, but no, I don't know quite the specifics of...
Sir, let me make you comfortable. I know it. I can tell by your tone. I can tell by the body language in your voice exactly the way you feel. You feel like I feel. Why don't we just go ahead and... I don't go in for nude bathing. I'm just uncomfortable. I'm shy. If I catch you bathing nude, I'm not going to grab you by the arm and scream for the law and pull a citizen's arrest. I just get uncomfortable in that kind of... All right, now, but politically, I say it's time to get naked. We must admit, all of us in the world must get naked politically and join hands and admit to one thing. And once we admit to this, we won't get all red-faced and bunched up and hate each other because we embarrass each other with good arguments at dinner parties. Here's the deal. You spin the globe anywhere. You put your finger down, close your eyes and put your finger down on the globe. Now, if you put your finger on ocean or Antarctica, spin again. But if your finger landed any place except water or the South Pole, then you can be sure of one thing. The people who live there now pushed the people who lived there once upon a time out, who before pushed other people out, who before pushed still other people out.
Just as the American colonization of the states destroyed the Indian cultures in the U.S., just as the Spanish colonization destroyed the Aztec civilization.
Okay, now we're talking. Now good. Now we're getting naked. All right.
Through Mesopotamia and blew apart the beginnings of all...
We're getting naked. We got our neckties off. We got our cufflinks off, almost down to our leotards now. Now you're talking. Now then, you say the British don't have a right to the Falklands. Israel doesn't have a right to the territory of Israel. Does Hungary have a right to Hungary? The Hungarians aren't even Europeans. And furthermore, neither are the Finns and the Estonians. They're they're Asians. They're from the Altaic Mountains. They came westward with Attila the Hun.
Right, but there go where nobody else would, so then I suppose they did have a right to it.
Forgive me, nobody else what? Nobody else what?
I mean, they did come and conquer the land.
But they didn't say, here is an uninhabited, lush, pastoral valley. Let us settle here and become Hungarians. They fought for it. That land was irrigated with blood. Now, wait a minute. Let's talk about the Egyptians. The Arabs are newcomers. When I say newcomers to Egypt, I don't mean they got there Wednesday before last. But you know what I mean. God still has the Rocky Mountains under new listings. The Arabs are newcomers to Egypt. They pushed the Egyptians out. The Spaniards pushed the Indians out. The English and the Dutch and the French in North America pushed the Indians out.
Right.
The Vikings...
wasn't sitting pretty either.
Exactly. So what I'm saying, sir, is you are right that the Americans took territory. The Israelis took territory. But the point is this. Most people stop right there. For some reason, there's a kinship between those who want to make America look bad and those who want to make Israel look bad. No. They're right, though. America did take land brutally from Indians. Israel did take land brutally from the Arabs, but so did everybody else. But let's end on Israel, because if you got to single out one country for having legitimacy, then Israel is that country. You know why? Because Israel was ordained. Israel was declared by the United Nations back before it became a VIP lounge for murderers and thieves and dictators. Russia was never, the Soviet Union was never legitimized by United Nations. America was never legitimized. Argentina was never legitimized by United Nations. Israel was, and the communist world at that time in 1948 voted yes, there shall be a Jewish state, and the United States said yes, there shall be a Jewish state. So Israel is the only country on the planet Earth that can say, hey, we have a birth certificate more valid than any other nation in the world.
Well, I'm 100% behind Israel. If for only one fact, and some of my best friends are Jewish, that Israel to us is like Cuba to Russia, which I further want to expound about. What is going on with Cuba? Why does the United States all of a sudden turn the cheek and offer Cuba an end to the embargo? What is going on? I was born in Cuba.
Oh, were you when?
In 1956.
Oh, so you were...
Major Huber Matos?
Of course, very well.
He's my uncle.
No.
Yes.
Well, Huber Matos is my hero of the Cuban Revolution. That man had guts. I wish Castro had appointed... I wish he had been Fidel Castro. He was one of the men with courage and intelligence who stood up against Fidel and went to prison almost forever for it. I did an article not long ago on the forgotten heroes of the Castro Revolution. Huber Matos is foremost among them. There were others, people who stood up to Fidel and got liquidated in the most brutal fashion sometime. Your uncle is a hero, a major hero he is a major freedom. As a matter of fact, in the name of your uncle, who I revere, I'm not going to hassle you anymore.
No.
You go ahead and take 15 seconds. Whatever you say goes with me, pal.
I certainly understand, yes.
Hey, thank you very much, and I hope we meet and continue this discussion, preferably in a free Havana someday.
I hope so.
Thank you very much. When you were in my home, I might let the word liberal slip. I might call them liberal columnists. I might call them new wave columnists. I might call them radical chic columnists. But I do believe that for America to take civilian defense seriously, the Soviets take civilian defense very seriously, and for America to do what Switzerland does, the liberal gets upset when you mention the example of Switzerland, because Switzerland is such an exquisite little piece of political jewelry. It is a democracy. And every single Swiss home is a little fortress. Every single Swiss has a military weapon at home and is part of a reserve unit somewhere. I would simply like to raise the cost for plucking America and putting it in your apron pocket. I would like to raise the stakes for anybody who thinks America, because of drugs, because of the collapse of any patriotic feeling, because our automobiles don't work well anymore. I would love for anybody surveying America and assaying America's vulnerability to see a new love of democracy, a new dedication to not any patriotic rubbish, but to the genuine attributes of America, its role in the world, its contribution to the world, what the world wants to derive from America. And I'd like to see America toughen up. Civil defense units, National Guard units, strong reserve, frequent exercises, sort of like they do in Switzerland and in Israel. Sir, there will always be visitors to New York paying money for the Brooklyn Bridge. There will always be people who say, I got a quick eye. I'm going to win some money from this three-card Monte guy. There will always be young ladies who go upstairs thinking he really wants to show her some etchings. So I agree with you. There will always be less fortunate people in democracies like America who think communism cures that. What has communism cured? Now, don't you give me literacy figures in communist China. Don't you give me protein increases among the broad mass average of the Cuban population. You take those communist triumphs and you hold them up against the triumphs. No, I'm talking over your shoulder to those. No, but you show me the triumphs of communism, and I will eliminate them by showing you the triumphs of comparable anti-communist regimes, free regimes, democratic regimes. So for all the marvelous things that our liberals said about the triumphs of communism in the Soviet Union, look at Finland. Finland sucked Soviet Russia up the exhaust pipe with its modernism, with its plenty for all. Even though Finland is way up in the north, agriculture has a terrible time. They lost 2 wars with the Soviet Union, paid $350 million reparations in 1945, and still, when you go from Russia into Finland, you think you are going into Disney World. You cannot. You got to bite your tongue and hold your breath at the disparity between life, everyday life, for people under Soviet communism versus democratic Finland. Those 2 systems started the same day. On the same day that the Soviets went communist, the Finlands went social democratic. They both belonged to the Tsar. Now, communism cannot put a team on the playing field in any single example of having done better for its people than democracy, but for taking hands off the ankles of blacks and making them first-class citizens, then I see the reason for that. If I see an amendment to extend the voting franchise to people who don't have it, I see the reason for that. That, to me, is what I call a real need. I do not think the ERA addresses itself to many real needs because I have known successful women all of my life. And I, want to fight the American proclivity that you can't move forward unless there's a law that says you can. I just like people who haul off and do it. Now, that's just my emotional preference. Right. So once I decide, once I ask myself the question, hey, do we really need the ERA? Are there women in chains below decks there screaming for relief? And is the ERA necessary? And when I answer no, it is not that kind of need. It's more for publicity. It's more for style. It's more for egos and publicity and political career. When I decide rightly or wrongly that, then I do something very cheap. Right. I choose my sides based on who is on which side. And then when I decide to be anti-ERA, which I am, in one little shopping trip, I collect in my basket my favorite enemies. They're all there together. All because of what they did in 68, because of what they said in 74. You understand? They're all there. So to me, it is just a plain old choose your side. It's field day. It's the tag wrestling match. It's combat time at the Swamp Cabbage Festival. Which side do you want to be on?
I agree with you.
And sitting in the coffee shop, waves at the waitress, yells, "Send me the manager." Manager comes over, man says, "This is the worst vanilla ice cream I ever had in my life." Manager leans over, takes a look, and says, "Sir, that's not vanilla, that's butter pecan." Man says, "Oh, well, for butter pecan, it's okay." Now, what does that have to do with the rally? Let me explain. If that rally had been a calm discussion, everybody sitting around discussing what is underneath that rally, then the rally, I believe, would have turned into a war. Because I took a magnifying glass, not my electronic microscope, others did that very well, but I examined the views of all the various parts of that coalition. And all they really agree on, they are 100% in agreement that not one single person in Central Park wanted to have a nuclear bomb fall on him. Outside of that, they ranged from out-and-out open table-pounding communists over to people resolutely in favor of the American thing, the American way, the American Constitution, American freedom, and legitimately wanted peace. And they were everywhere in between. When a coalition is that wide, it is therefore meaningless. I separated myself from the rally not on the 1960s grounds, a bunch of mangy people out to overthrow the government and siding with the Not at all. Not at all. I separated myself from that rally on grounds of sophistication only. I joined them in not wanting to have a nuclear bomb fall on anyone we know or anyone we don't know. Okay, 2 categories of people. I'm for that. I'm against that bomb. I'm for peace. But sheer sophistication would keep me from marching side by side with so many throaty people who either will not approach the real issues, the real villains, the real victims, the real truth. They will not ask the real questions. And if so, they're on the wrong side of those real questions. So how in the world can I stand there with a smile and get that good old adrenaline marching, whoopee, look at all these people for peace? It was fun. Good, clean fun. It was not vanilla. It was very butter pecan. This is a free country. You've got your civil rights, if you choose, to log last Saturday's rally in your diary as an anti-nuclear demonstration. In my diary, it goes down as a summer festival. And nothing wrong with them. We need more.
I really do. Concerning your comments about the rally, you bought the whole bit that they are a broad representation of American public opinion.
Oh, forgive me. I'm not. You got me alarmed at first, but you are hitting me from my right. I'm comfortable there. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I wanted to say that the representative of the right wing there on Saturday was Teddy Kennedy.
No. Forgive me. I did not mean that. Well, all right. Go ahead. I accept your punishment. What I meant was the individuals in that crowd. They were the ones who got foxed. I did not get foxed. I didn't go.
I don't think that they got foxed either, and I don't mean that they were all communists or that they were all socialists even. But this crowd, I would guess, by and large, is a generally left-thinking, liberal type crowd. I would like to know how many of the 750,000, for instance, voted for Ronald Reagan. In speech after speech after speech, what I heard about was Ronald Reagan falling asleep at the Vatican, and Ronald Reagan's brutal attack upon the poor, et cetera, et cetera. Not a word about Brezhnev.
But you see, I rejoiced in that because I think, I believe in what Charles Wiley says. No war was ever stopped by a peace movement. Many wars have been invited by a peace movement. Wars are stopped by strong victims, by the victim being invulnerable. That is my recipe for peace. I've been alive enough to have studied many recipes for peace. I'm really, at least by my own claim, a very good person. I could not relate to anybody who wants war, lusts for war, glories in war. I'm as peaceful as any. I just believe that peace is achieved through strength.
I'd assume you'd be more...
You heard my opening remarks. Obviously you did. I say that in my book, I don't log it as a rally, as an anti-nuclear rally. To me, it will go down in my personal diary as a summer festival. Hence the freeze.
I'd like to know why.
I had a long talk with Dr. Edward Teller, and he says the freeze...
Go ahead.
First of all, what did you say about Teller this morning?
He said something fascinating, or one thing. I'm sorry I'm interrupting you. He said at the end of this show on 13 that peace is not merely the absence of war. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the kind of situation we find ourselves in today. Mm-hmm. They're not in a state of peace.
All right. Doctor, first of all, the fact that the Soviets want to freeze so much should tell us something. Dr. Teller, who knows a lot more about our nuclear capabilities and deployment than I do, believes that a freeze right now would be, in the words of the White House, not to America's advantage. It would be to the Soviet Union's advantage. So I'm opposed to this freeze. I'm opposed to anything with Russia. I'm opposed to any kind of negotiation with Russia that does not have verifiable means or valid means of verification. One thing we forget, the first 52 treaties that we signed with the Soviet Union, only 2 of them were not violated the last time I looked. 50 out of 52. I don't trust them, and I'll tell you why I don't trust them. Because if you study their words, they think you're a sucker if you do trust them. They have a different concept of truth. Now, they believe that anything that serves the revolution of the working class is fair tactic. They think it is absolutely consistent with morality to lie if that furthers the communist cause. So I don't take it from the John Birch Society remnants that the Soviet Union is not to be trusted. I take it from Orthodox Soviet communist doctrine itself that they are not to be trusted. So you're a Lebanese Christian?
Yeah.
I am not startled by much. I guess I'm startled by what I consider good news. I was knocked out when I heard just before this broadcast that the Lebanese were cheering the invading Israelis and shouting shalom, which is Hebrew.
Right. And Arafat, they should give Arafat to the Lebanese Christian, what they've done to them. You know, they've taken all the Jewish residents, it's all in the hands of the PLO. They came as guests and they abused the hospitality. They made the Lebanon an armed camp. You know what they said? We're going to kill the Christians and the Jews. There will be only Muslim in this area. We'll take Lebanon, we'll take Jordan, and we'll take Israel. All this with the help of the Russians. And I don't know how people don't understand what's happening down there. Nobody cares about east.
Barry,
yes.
Again, I'm going to abandon that great place, Guilford Courthouse. Make a few quick statements. You know how I feel. I feel as you do. First, a few quick statements on the main subject. Last night, Abby Hoffman was on one of the talk shows, and he did the same thing. He was being asked the most innocuous questions. He was uncomfortable. He wanted to leave. And I realized that these people on the left don't like cross-examination. They just like to make their statements, draw out all sorts of bills, and just build up these things, atrocities, and so on. He was saying, I feel uncomfortable here. I don't feel like staying. Now, the other thing, as you know, I'm a military historian. When you mentioned Charles Wiley, I don't know where we got that, but it's absolutely right. Quincy Wright, in his book, A Study of War, said the same thing. He said that peace movements, no matter how unfortunate, lead to war. The hostility of the nation turns not against aggressors, but against the peace movers.
Not only that, but the peace movement gives the enemy the illusion that there's rottenness on the inside. There's no will to fight. There's only a will to surrender and disarm and all the rest.
Now, about the rally, you were right. There was a repetition. I don't think the Democratic Party will hold a convention. They had it Saturday, and the rock music was great. I mean, for rock music devotees.
It was a marvelous summer festival.
Yeah, but again, you see, I felt nauseous when, for example, Peter Yarrow, Peter, Paul, and Mary, who you know confessed in an open court that he was a child molester and threw himself on the mercy of the court. This high moral person.
All right, sir, forgive me. I'm not only high and moral, I'm out of time. I like all your remarks, except the last one. It was ad hominem. I don't think
I know it wasn't ad hominem. My message.
Okay, but I don't think we need that to buttress your greater point. Thank you. Certain things just sound unprofessional. You know how those dignified Europeans get, they have to go to the lounge, put a cold compress on their head when a president just pops off and says something gutsy and real. I like President Reagan's badgering of the Russians in Berlin. He said, when I get to the wall, maybe I'll write a question and put it in a bottle and throw it over the wall. The audience loved that. Why is that wall there? Now, that wall's been there since the year 1961. Why haven't more presidents looked the Russians in the eye and said, why is that wall there? Ooh, I loved it. I think the president will come out and propose some kind of plan like this. But you must understand, he just can't put earphones on his head like I can and say, I want Russians crawling all over American installations, and I want the right to crawl all over theirs, with Russian-speaking Americans unimpeded by any Soviet guard. If we're going to have if we're going to play strip poker, we're going to play strip poker. You're not going to be able to keep brassieres and panties on.
As you probably know, during the midst, while the rally was going on, Caspar Weinberger came out in a press conference and said that American foreign policy is not made in the streets. I'd like to, well, first of all, my opinion is that the government is supposedly representative of the people in a democracy. How do you account for his saying that, and do you agree with that?
Sir, you are cheating. You are cheating. I haven't heard this kind of a trick play since everybody during the Vietnam War said General Eisenhower said that Ho Chi Minh would have won a free election. They left out the other part of the sentence, against Bao Dai, the little Coca-Cola drinking puppet who spent his time not in Vietnam but on the French Riviera. Weinberger said, he cleared his throat and then said what you just said. He said, in a democracy, the voice of the people is really all that counts, but rallies like this do not change policy suddenly. I thought it was a very good statement. I was afraid. I mean, come on, we're grown-ups. The rally was an anti-Reagan rally, an anti-American rally, in a sense. Now, the edge of the rally was anti-American. In my view, they weren't as upset about the Soviets as they were about the Americans.
Don't you think that the rally was pro-life?
Sir, it was a summer festival, and insofar as summer festivals are pro-life, yes. Now, just let me finish. I think Caspar Weinberger gave just the right tone, pointing out, let's go ahead and have have all kinds of summer fun, but do not think that Washington is going to come apart like an Alka-Seltzer tablet under Niagara Falls merely because 700,000 people with all the singing and the dancing and the whoop-de-doo get together in Central Park and agree that they don't want nuclear bombs to fall upon them. Caspar Weinberger then went ahead and said what you criticized him for not saying. He said that in a democracy, of course, the people are the ones who decide, but he simply was trying to make the point, and I'd like to help him make the point because I agree with it, that foreign policy, military policy is not decided by rallies. We have things called elections for that kind of decision. At the moment, those who are elected have a mandate to do my thing, which is to keep America nuclearly and conventionally invulnerable.
Well, but
the Murray Baron overview.
The rather impressive achievements of the KGB and the Soviet Union in propaganda warfare, and they have spread throughout the free world an equation that is psychologically quite persuasive, and that is that the Soviet Union is the fountainhead of an anti-nuclear power and nuclear weapon policy, and implying that there are elements within governments of the Western free nations and among certain elements within their free populations who are pro-nuclear war. And having achieved that equation, they then move in with the high moral ground from which for 60-odd years they have achieved temporary successes in their impact on the moldable, persuadable public opinions of the free society.
Murray Baron, of course, of Freedom House, Murray Baron of Accuracy in Media. We have
the media with respect to Ground Zero, which was a fiasco in terms of turnout, and with respect to this current movement, which climaxed on Saturday. A large part of the media did not engage in reporting the news. They were promoting the event.
I must second your emotion there. I had the feeling, the words were different, but the melody was the same. I had the feeling watching television coverage. I haven't had that feeling since I was in Moscow, where the Soviet pretty girl smiles for the camera and gives news such as the peace train is arriving from Bucharest. It's promoting the event and not reporting the news is a concise way to put it, and I want to thank you before we part. Tell us, the ratings tell us, the surveys tell us, keep it light, kid, keep it light. Come on, the people out there don't want to keep hearing about war and Falklands, and Middle East, and nuclear destruction. Come on, kid, you got them neck deep in Weltschmerz. Give them a break. Come on, something light, something giddy, something frothy. Come on, Barry, get with it. Give them a little la-di-da. Well, I am perfectly willing, in order to maintain my professional standing, to dole out a little la-di-da, but there is no la-di-da for me today. Hot pincers could not take the FCC would have to send a squad car with a revolving red light and drag me out of here by the heels to keep me from talking about what is going on right now. Yes, I mean the heavy stuff, because I have heaviness in my heart because of the lives lost. I have jubilation because of the victory, stunning, reverberating victory of two democracies. It's been so long since democracies were attacked. Look what happened yesterday. Something happened yesterday for the fourth time since 1945, and it happened on the same day. How many times since 1945 has a dictatorship attacked a democracy, gotten its nose bloodied, and the democracy went ahead and won? Okay, World War II. When was the next time? When was the next time? Let's skip the 40s. Forget the entire 50s. Forget the 60s. The next time a democracy rallied upon being attacked by a dictatorship and went on to win was in 1973, the Yom Kippur War, when Israel was attacked by Egypt and Syria. And yesterday, we were treated to two victorious democracies in one day. Now, I may be having deep psychological problems. I don't know. But I disagree with John Chancellor. Now, disagreeing with John Chancellor is serious business in the social circles in which I circulate. You do not agree with John Chancellor. You pride yourself on how much you feel like John Chancellor, this great statesman, once upon a time head of the USIA, now a commentator on NBC. But I wish I knew Roger Mudd. If you know Roger Mudd, do me a favor. Say, Roger, there's a guy named Barry Farber in New York on WMCA, and he wonders if that expression on your face after John Chancellor's last line on the June the 14th, NBC 7 o'clock news, he wonders if that expression on your face was what he thought it was. Did your jaw really, were you staggered by John Chancellor's last line? Well, I was certainly staggered by John Chancellor's last line, and I want to see if you were staggered by John Chancellor's last line. John Chancellor ended, and I don't have a transcript. Oh, wouldn't it be great to be a network, a television network, have 5.5 acres of secretaries with IBM typewriters and word processors lined up hubcap to hubcap. I wouldn't have to remember. I wouldn't have to reconstruct. I could read from it where the last, he was saying, let me give it to you the best I can remember from last night. He said, here we have, it's been a very bad time for America lately. Here we've shown we cannot restrain our friends, the British. We had to side with our friends, the British, and we've lost our influence in Latin America. And we proved we could not keep our friends, the Israelis, from misusing our weapons and rampaging through Lebanon. Now we're going to lose our influence in the Arab world. And what are we going to do with the Falklands? And what are we going to do with Lebanon? And the last line was something like, fasten your seatbelt, it was something like, so we now have Britain and Israel changing the world to the worse for America. Now, I must first, don't stop me if you've heard this, because if 10 or 12 people hear this for the first time and think about it, then I will have accomplished my mission in filling in for Barry Gray on this session. My favorite philosopher when it comes to war is my father, Raymond Farber, because when I was in short pants and still speaking soprano in Greensboro, North Carolina, we were in the middle of World War II. And one morning I woke up early, and on the front page of the Greensboro Daily News there was some sea battle, some American triumph, and it said, Americans drown 2,000 Japs. That's what it said. That was the headline. And I darted into my father's bedroom where he was sleeping. I said, Daddy, Daddy, great news. We killed 2,000 Japs. And my father said, Barry, I know what you mean, son. I know what you mean. But bear this in mind. This is right in the hottest part of World War II. He said, Barry, I know what you mean, but bear in mind it is never good news when men die. So when I tell you what I'm going to tell you now, bear in mind that it is not against the backdrop of hooray, we kicked these and we routed these and we're going to no, not leave me out of those vulgar displays of chauvinism, xenophobia, jingoism, macho. I want the victory of democracy. I'm a surgeon, lady. I'm not a pep rally cheerleader. I'm a surgeon who believes that for the survival of mankind, for the prosperity of mankind, to help children and other growing things, we need democracy. Now, John Chancellor said the world has been changed for the worse. I think the world has been changed for the better by the British victory and by the Israeli victory. When we reconvene after a short business break, I will tell you in great detail why I think the world has been changed for the better. Where are the pro-anti-nuclear rally people? Where are the ones who disagree with me? Come out, strip to the waist, put on leotards of your chosen color, and fight right here in front of everybody. My telephone for saying and for believing, in contradistinction with commentator John Chancellor, who we heard on WNBC Network TV last night. He said that the British triumph and the Israeli triumph have changed the world to the worse for America. I think it's changed the world for the better. First of all, it shows that democracies still can and will fight and still can win. The Soviet Union all of a sudden has something else to consider. They've always considered Israel to be a problem, but now Israel has the terrorists, Israel is smashing the PL. Where is some applause, folks? Where is some standing applause for Israel going in single-handedly and solving the problem of every nation in the world? Portuguese air passengers, Swedish missionaries, Paraguayan businessmen, Japanese tourists can all rejoice that the biggest blow struck yet has been delivered or is about to or may be being delivered as I'm talking about it against the heart, the brains, the gut work of not just the PLO or the international terrorist operation. They are there in their bunker. Let's hope it's their final bunker in Beirut right now, not just the PLO. You heard representatives of the Italian Red Army, the Baader-Meinhof gang, great old bunch of boys. And they are now sealed, trapped in that area of Beirut as Israelis and cheering Lebanese allies. Turns my tired blood into sparkling burgundy to see reality break out in the Middle East. We knew that those Lebanese didn't hate Israel. The Lebanese Christians view the Israeli soldiers as liberators because of what the PLO and the Syrians have done to that once upon a time beautiful Arab democracy, Lebanon, since the year 1970. They wish the Israelis had come in the next day. Okay, international terror has been reduced. That is a plus. The Russians all of a sudden have Britain on their windshield now. Britain was supposed to have been a has-been back in 1945, but hark, look at here. Here's Britain without American help sending a tap. How can a commentator get on network television and talk about our faded now, in 1982, our influence in South America is going to fade because we helped the British in the Falkland Islands, gave them support, refused to help Argentina? How can a commentator say that 23 years after Fidel Castro has run a communist Cuba 90 miles off our shore? So much for our influence in Latin America. I think this will increase the respect of the Western world, even in that Latin America which pretends to oppose United States support of Great Britain. Scratch a Chilean, ask him how he feels. Scratch a Brazilian, ask him how he feels. Scratch a Paraguayan, ask him how he feels. As for our influence in the Arab world, have you wondered why why did the Arab leaders, when they went for King Khalid's funeral, Mubarak of Egypt, why was there no talk of an oil boycott against what the Israelis did in Lebanon? Come on, networks, we need you. I'm just local radio. When are you going to lean into those cameras and tell the world the truth? That the entire Arab world despises the PLO and is overjoyed to see Israel kick the shish kebab out of the PLO. Those are some, not all, of the reasons I believe the world has been changed, not for the worse, but for the better by the victory of the two democracies, Britain and Israel, in the last few days. Now, for the dessert portion of this show, I'll give you my recipe to finish off the project of saving the world. But meanwhile, let's hear from you. Well, thank you very much. If there are more people like you, then you will hear more people like me on the radio. We're here. There are many more like me, but we are still, Louis Armstrong had a magnificent line. Whenever somebody said, "Hey, Louis, what's new?" He'd smile, that big smile, and say, "White folks still in the lead." Well, when anybody asks me what's new, the correct answer should be, the other side still controls most of the major media, and I want them there. I'll go to the ramparts with a broken bourbon bottle to fight for the John Chancellors and the Edwin Newmans. We need them. But I want a balance, that's all. I want a balance. I want our opinions to be treated no longer as freaky little exceptions to the diet. As I told you yesterday, if you say rally to me, I may be coy, but I'm going to say, what rally? It was no rally. It was a summer festival. I log it. I will discuss it only as the only diplomatic recognition they get from me is as a summer festival, because the coalition was so broad that it was meaningless. You understand? You had out-and-out Moscow communists, you had anti-Moscow communists, you had Maoists, you had Trotskyists, you had plain old left-wingers, you had apolitical people, you had anti-communists, you had socialists, you had children, you had women, you had the works. You had a great team for a summer festival. But as a coalition, anything that broad, I mean, it's like a coalition of staunch Roman Catholics and staunch abortionists to march together and talk about life. Each thinks it's talking about life. It is like having pig farmers and rabbis join hands and march through Crown Heights, Brooklyn, talking about nutrition. Here we are in this great pro-nutrition coalition. While we're on the subject, this is filigree stuff. This is electronic microscope stuff. The communists have played a very interesting trick regarding Ukraine. Now, right now, the audience wonders why I didn't say it right. The audience thinks it's the Ukraine. That's a clever communist trick right there. Ukraine. That's the name of the country. Ukraine. Ukraine. Not the Ukraine. You say, I'm going to Mexico. You don't say, I'm going to the Mexico. But if you wanted to give the impression that Mexico was an integral part of the United States, then you would slip in the the. Very clever, those Russians. They don't even have a definite article in their language, but they know that if they can circulate the expression, the Ukraine, then that strips Ukraine of any right to be a nation in the minds of people saying and hearing the term, the Ukraine.
Well, I like to say I agree with what George Ball said on last Thursday's Nightline, and I think his courage in calling a spade really surprised me. I think, as he said that, President Reagan could have stopped the Israeli invasion of Lebanon immediately if he had the courage to stand up to the Zionist voting bloc, because Israel is completely dependent on the United States militarily and economically, and all Reagan would have had to do would be to threaten to cut off the arms shipments and the $2.5 billion in yearly cash aid, and Reagan would have to stop. But I think he knows he can get away with it because Reagan, like every other president since Truman, is willing to make our country look like Israel's accomplice because he fears Zionist electoral blackmail.
All right, look, sir, look, I've cut you off. Stop talking now. I'm going to cut you back on. But I remember you from previous movies, okay? You are a resolute anti-Zionist. That's what you call yourself. I've caught you in some slips that indicate to me you are anti more than just merely Zionism. Now then, I want to ask you a couple of organized questions, and then I'll let you go ahead and have your burst. And when I feel that you've said enough, not when I get tired of you, because I was born tired of you. I don't like your political philosophy. I don't like that. I sense an evil energy in your voice. You bother me, okay? I want to put that up front. But I'm going to let you speak what I consider an appropriate amount of time after you answer my questions. And regardless of the temptation, I will not comment upon you or upon what you said afterward. I have a slight advantage in that I'm on the air regularly. You're on the air only when you can break through to spew out your anti-Zionist emotions. Now then, have you and do you really want to come on an American radio station endorsing international terror and the PLO and spewing forth that venom against those who, while we're arguing about it, may have already destroyed the PLO? Your turn.
I think that's wishful thinking. If any harm comes to Arafat, I think it will boomerang. But I'd like you to know something else that George Ball said. He said he was sick and tired of hearing a country which holds 2 million Arabs in virtual serfdom referred to as the Middle East only democracy. And he was also sick and tired of hearing a country which has caused more anti-Americanism in the Muslim world than any other force referred to as our strategic asset. I think if you're really as anti-Soviet as you think, should come out against this craven Israel First policy, which is driving our Muslim friends into the Soviet arms before.
Since you were so mercifully brief, let's have another round. I just have one short retort. America, not too long ago, held millions of Germans and many, many more millions of Japanese. And whatever you said, George Ball held Israel held the Palestinians in, what would you say, in thrall or in serfdom?
Virtual servitude.
In virtual servitude. Does that make America less of a democracy because we won a war and had to administer a captive population? You quite correctly point out that America gave Germany its democratic government, gave Japan its democratic government. You could have added that we took the occasion to free the Philippines after having bled and fought to liberate them from the Japanese. And a lot of that said. You quite correctly point out that Israel has not given a Palestinian homeland to the Arab population in those territories. I want to ask you this. Germany and Japan surrendered unconditionally and abjectly and welcomed, either accepted with grudging resignation or cheerfully welcomed the new American rule. Now, do you think America would have given West Germany its government or given Japan its government if instead of unconditional surrender, they had gotten clenched fists and bombs thrown into nurseries and shelling of villages and determination to use powerful allies elsewhere in the world to destroy America? Would we have, under those conditions, sir, given Germany and Japan its independence? What do you look forward to? Just let me tell you what I look forward to. I look forward to a government of Lebanon restored to its original democracy, allied with Israel in a friendship, trade, and cultural exchange pact, purged of all outside forces, Palestinian, Syrian, as well as Israeli, and allowing anyone to live in Lebanon, just as before 1970, who is willing to respect the authority of the Lebanese government, not Yasser Arafat and the PLO, and not the Syrian invaders. That's what I look forward to. What do you look forward to?
Well, what I look forward to is Dr. Alfred Lilienthal would say the de-Zionization of the Palestinian state. I would like to see the Israel get rid of the law of return. I would like to see the Palestinians be allowed to return to their homeland, and a secular democratic state be set up in all of Palestine.
Okay, fine. We have we have had a fruitful exchange of views. Thank you very much for your call.